In this video, we're going to show you how to add VR or virtual reality capabilities to your scene. All right, so let's get started. Now, there is a lot of support for VR using Sumerian, and looking at a tutorial, I will jump to my screen real quick. We will be using the VR asset pack, and we will primarily be walking through this tutorial. And if you notice, the what is supported here by Sumerian is there are several different platforms supported by Sumerian for VR. Now, we will be using the Oculus Rift here in the studio, but remember that there are several different headsets and platforms that you can use. And so be aware of that. But of course, the controls will look a little bit different depending on what you are using. More specifically in this video, we're going to be looking at how to add the VR asset pack, add teleportation, add grabbing capabilities, and how to use the activate action, that is clicking on controllers and initiating behaviors. All right, I've started a new scene here in Sumerian, and I'm going to set up a couple things to get started. Now again, we're going to be closely following this tutorial. And this is in the description of this video you can find as well. So we're going to primarily be following most of this. We're going to add a couple things or change just a little bit. So you can follow along that tutorial as well. All right, let's go ahead and create an entity. And I'm going to go ahead and select a quad. And I'm going to change the transform to -90. And if I click the F key here in the canvas, let me increase the size of my screen a little bit. There we go. If I select the quad and click the F key, we will zoom in on that quad. All right, I'm going to rename the quad ground. And I will make it, I'll change the scale in the transform to 100, 100, and 100. Zoom out, you will see just this large quad. All right, I'm also going to add a component. I'm going to add a collider. We're going to add a collider so that we can actually move across the ground. So we can collide using our controllers and teleportation. That'll be a little bit later in the video. The shape of the collider, I could have a box, but if I zoom out, you'll see that the bounding limits for this collider are very big. So it's actually outside this box. So instead of a box, I'm going to use a infinite plane. If you kind of zoom in a little bit closer, you'll see the green outline in the middle of the quad. One other thing you could do is I could do a box. I'll go back to do a box, and I will make the half extents much smaller. And so it's really just, you could just make a tiny little box surrounding your ground, so unlike in real life scale, it'd be, a couple inches above the ground. So that's another possibility. I'm going to go ahead and just use an infinite plane to make it a lot easier. Now, instead of having this big white plane, I'm going to import assets, and I'm going to add some materials. You might not see all these materials, I should say, in your asset library. I'm going to go ahead and select the material metal. And with my ground selected, and I'll open up the material, and I'll just select how about chrome material, and I'll add that over to my default material. All right, so I have some chrome. Now, it looks really pixelated, and that is fine. If I go down to my color diffuse under my material, and you see there's a little edit button. Under this texture, I'm going to click the edit button, and I'm going to increase the repeat U up to 125 or so. Or 115, that's all right too, and 115 in the other direction. So this is actually going to start repeating this texture throughout this much larger material. Maybe let's do 150. 150. We might even need to go, let's try 300 and just see what happens. That's much better, okay. Okay. All right. So we have some more interesting material on the ground. Now let's add the next thing, which is really important, of course, is the VR asset pack. I'm going to click Import Assets up here above the canvas, and you'll see the VR asset pack. It has this kind of white thumbnail, I will click that and click add. It'll be added down here into my assets panel. If I just filter down to, well, let me just collapse these materials. Now I see the VR asset pack, and what I want to look for is this VR camera rig entity hexagon icon. You can also filter down to entities by selecting the entities icon up here in the filters bar or the filters menu. There we go, makes it a little easier. So I'll take the VR camera rig and add it to my scene. And the one other thing I need to do is select the current VR camera rig over here under VR camera rig component. All right. Now, that is actually all I have to do to add VR to my scene. All right, and to test this out, we are just going to click the play button, and then we'll select the Enter VR button over here in the bottom right. All right, and then it goes into a stereoscopic mode. View. That's why you see a split screen. You can see my controllers. Oops. There's my controllers. However, I can't do anything. I can't move. I can't move around. I can look around. I can turn all around and look in all different directions, but I can't move yet. All right. That's because we've enabled VR. The simple basics of VR being able to look around and be in the space, and I have 6 degrees of freedom, but yet I don't have the ability to move around yet. That's why in this next section, we are going to look at how to add teleportation. All right, let's stop our scene. Very simple to add teleportation. We have all the components and the assets that we need to do that. If I select the ground that I've already added to my scene, I will click Add Component, and then I will add a script. Where is the script? There it is. I'll add a script component here. It already has a collider. I've already added that. Now, if you go over to your assets panel under your VR asset pack, you'll see there are 3 different scripts. I'll go ahead and filter down to just scripts. 3 scripts that you see here at the top. To use teleport, grab the teleport script and add it to the script drop input of the entity that you want to be able to teleport around. So, for example, just like in this situation, we have a ground. We're going to be adding the script to the ground. Whatever you want to be able to walk on or move about upon, that is what you're going to be adding your script to. So if you have stairs or a bridge or whatever you're going to be walking across or moving across, that is what you want to add the teleport script to. All right, now let's go ahead and press play and see how this works. We'll click the Enter VR button. You'll notice I have these little character icons, and as I click my button, I am moving. I'm to the edge of my quad, so I'm going to move back. Just point behind me. And that is how you add teleportation to your scene. But one thing to note is, you see as I'm moving my controller, that little character, you see how it goes out a certain distance, but then once it reaches a certain limit, then it turns into just that little sphere. That is because the pointer settings have a certain limit, and we're going to look at how to change that. So I'll exit out of VR, and I will stop my scene. And if I go to my VR camera rig and I expand it, you see there are VR pointer settings as a child entity. I'll expand that one. Then there's a VR pointer primary and a VR pointer secondary. If I select one of these two, or both of them, you'll notice under the VR pointer settings, there's a script with a parameter that says the max target distance is 10 units. So if I want to be able to go further, if I want to be able to teleport farther than 10 units, then I can increase this by whatever number I want, or I can obviously go less than that. So that is how you would actually adjust how far you can teleport in one click or in one movement. There are some trade-offs that we will look at here shortly, so just keep that in mind. That is how you would do it. Now, changing it for one does not change it for the other, so you would have to change it for both the primary and the secondary. We'll go ahead and leave it. That is how you would change the max distance of your teleportation target, that little character that you see. All right, in this next section, we will now be looking at how to add grab capabilities to your scene. All right, to add grab capabilities, we need to add something to our scene that we can grab. So I will click Create Entity, and I will add a box. Zoom out my box, and I'll move it up over here. Move it out of the way just a little bit. I'll click Add Component, and I will click Collider. I'll add another component, and I will add a rigid body to it. Now, like we did with the teleport, we added a script, remember, a teleport script to the ground that we wanted to be able to move upon or teleport upon. Similarly, you will need to add a grab script, as you see down here. You need to add a grab script to any object that you want to be able to grab. So, because I have my box still selected, I'll click Add Component. Now I will add a script component, and under the drop script input, I will then take my grab script and drop it right there. That defines this box as a grabbable script. Now, because I added both a collider and a rigid body, when I press play, you'll see, I didn't load quite fast enough, but you see how that actually fell to the ground. So it was suspended in air, the box, but because it has a rigid body, it then fell down to the ground, and because it has a collider on it, it stops there. All right, so I will now enter VR again. I need to find my box. I think it's behind me. Oh, there it is. And here I can grab my box. And I have this little hand icon indicating that this is grabbable. See how it changes as I hover from the ground up to the box. It changes from the teleport target icon to the grab the hand icon. And as I move that around, if I let go, then it falls down to the ground. That's because it has a rigid body added to it. Now, something to note is you can actually get pretty far away, and I can still grab this. And that's because my pointer settings are set to 10. And so I can grab this entity as far as 10 units goes. So you see it's too far away for me to grab, but if I get closer, then I can grab it. All right, so that's kind of the trade-off, is that these pointer settings are universal. And so if I make it so I can teleport farther, that also means that I can grab things that are really, really far away. So similarly, if I want to be able to only grab things that are within reaching distance, then I would need to be able to, I would have to add or reduce the pointer settings, but that also means that I would not be able to teleport as far. And so again, you just got to remember that trade-off between pointing and teleporting, the trade-off between teleporting and grabbing. Okay, now in the next section, let's look at how to activate behaviors using your pointers or your controllers in VR. All right, I'm going to exit VR and stop my scene. Due to a known issue and some other things, we are going to remove the collider, or the rigid body, from the box. So I'm going to remove the collider. So now it does have a collider on it, the box, but it doesn't have a rigid body, so it won't fall to the ground, so it won't simulate gravity. Okay, so now what I need to do is I already have a script component added to my box. Oops, the ground. Nope, box, but I had the ground selected. So with the box selected, you see, of course, there's the script component, and now I need to add the activate script to the drop input. So now my box has two script instances, the VR action object grab and the VR action object activate. What this does is allows us to emit a message based on some input that we can customize right here. So under input, I'm going to do on action button down. That means that any action on a button that goes down, we're going to then emit a message. So you could do the same thing as on hover enter or on hover exit. Also on action button up. So when you push the button and then release, then it would emit a message. I'm going to go ahead and do on action button down, and I'm going to make my message be click box. All right. Now also on my because you could have it do anything you want. If I could click the box and have another behavior somewhere else occur or be triggered. But I just want to have a behavior on the box itself be triggered. So again, once you have an emitted message in your scene, you can do really anything you want. But I'll make it simple, and I'll add a state machine on my box. I'll click the plus button under my state machine component to then add a behavior. And the first state we're going to add is, the first state we'll rename to listen, and then we will add a listen action. And the message channel we want to be listening to is click box. I will add a state, and I'll call it scale up, and I'll add an action. And again, this is in the video or the tutorial, the written tutorial, a lot of the same activity. There's some differences, but for the most part, it's the same. Tween scale, we will select tween scale. Again, it doesn't really matter what you make this do. I'm just showing some sort of reactivity to a click activity. I will then change the scale to 2, 2, and 2. I'll leave everything else the same, except for I will unselect relative. I'll then select my listen action and duplicate it, because we want it to be listening again for just the click on the box. And I will duplicate my scale up, rename it to scale down, and I'll change these values all to 1. I will then add my transitions by selecting these transitions labels on the bottom half of my states and going in counterclockwise order. Let's test this out. I'm going to go ahead and close this. But what we'll see happen is, when I enter VR, when I point at the box and I click the button, it will then initiate that behavior, which will grow or shrink the box, or scale it up and scale it down. So let's enter VR and see what happens. Okay, so I got to get back here. I just teleported behind the box. Now, as I click on it, you see what happens is it grows and it shrinks. That's because this click down button is emitting a message that the box's behavior is listening to and is growing. And now it's listening again for that click behavior, or that click behavior to emit that message, click box, and it goes back down. So it just goes back and forth, grows and shrinks. Now, also because I have the grab script still attached to the box, I can grab it. So I can still move it around and it will still shrink and get larger and get smaller. Okay? And that's how you get started with the basics of VR. Being able to teleport, being able to grab, and also activate behaviors using click actions in your controllers. Thanks for watching.